The studio lights over the Luna choice burned white enough to make the whole stage look like a held breath. Alpha King Rowan Thorne stood at its center in a black suit cut for cameras, a silver ring resting in his palm, while millions of wolves across the pack watched from their own living rooms and their own uncertain futures. Vivienne Cross stood across from him in a gown the color of a decision already made, her posture perfect, her smile calibrated to the exact second the broadcast light blinked red. The host's voice rolled out over the studio speakers, announcing that this was the moment the pack had been waiting for, the moment love and stability would finally become the same word. Noble houses leaned toward their screens. Rogue districts watched to see if their future had already been decided without them. Sponsors watched their logos glow faintly in the corner of the frame. Council members watched their approved script play out exactly as written. Rowan lifted the ring, and the studio held its breath along with him. Behind the stage wall, in a hallway lined with folding tables and half-empty champagne glasses, Aria Moss was carrying a tray toward the green room when her knees buckled without warning. The tray hit the floor first, glass shattering in a sound too small to be heard over the broadcast. Aria hit the floor second. Blood bloomed through the white fabric of her uniform directly over her heart, and beneath it, a mark opened across her skin, silver-edged and red at the center, shaped like a wound that had not happened yet. A backup camera, positioned to catch candidates arriving from the wings, swung toward the noise on instinct. It caught her. On the main stage, Rowan's eyes flicked to the small monitor near his feet, the one meant only for stage direction, and froze on the image of a woman collapsing behind the glass wall, with a bullet mark blooming on her chest. Vivienne saw it too, her smile faltering for exactly half a second before she caught it and smoothed it back into place. Aria looked up through the glass, past the lights, past the ring still glinting in Rowan's hand, and found his eyes across the distance. "That is not my wound. It is yours." Julian Sable's voice cracked through every headset backstage at once. Cut the feed. It was already too late. The whole pack had already seen it. Hours before the ring, before the gown, before the cameras had turned toward anything but candidates, Aria had been exactly what she always was backstage, invisible. She carried champagne trays for Luna candidates who never looked at her long enough to remember her face. She swept broken glass, blotted makeup stains from white silk, brought water to noble mothers who called her girl without asking her name, and kept herself out of every camera's path with the practiced ease of someone who had spent a lifetime learning where the lenses did not reach. Backstage, they had names for her that were not her name: Stain Girl, Bad Omen Waitress, Curse Girl, Service Omega, Death Mark Rat. She knew the building better than anyone with a badge. The kitchen corridor that ran behind the set walls, the wardrobe tunnel that connected dressing rooms without crossing a single active camera, the lighting platform 2 floors above the stage, the blind zones where no broadcast lens had ever been aimed, the service elevator that opened onto an alley behind a wall of artificial flowers meant to look like an emergency exit, but functioning as one all the same. She had learned all of it the way her mother had taught her to learn everything, quietly, and with an exit always in mind. Aria Moss had carried the same curse once. Noble houses had used her for years, not as a person, but as a warning system for their alpha heirs, keeping her near enough that if death ever came close, her body would announce it before any guard could. They never asked if it hurt. They only asked one question, over and over, in every hallway and every crisis: where is the mark? The first time a noble asked Aria where the mark was, she was 13 and still believed, Pain meant someone would help her. By the time her mother died, she had learned better. Pain only made powerful people look for instructions. Mara had died carrying a death path meant for a noble boy whose family had already forgotten her name by the time the ink dried on the incident report. Before the end, she had told her daughter one thing that Aria carried heavier than the curse itself. Do not let them turn your pain into their security system. Aria took the waitress job at the Luna Choice for one reason only, to cover the last of her mother's medical debts, and she had promised herself she would get through every broadcast without anyone learning what lived beneath her skin. Rowan Thorne had not always stood at the center of studio lights like a man built for them. He had inherited a pack fracturing in every direction at once. Noble houses demanding a pureblood Luna, rogue districts demanding reform they had been promised for a decade, sponsors demanding stability they could put a face to, and a council that had learned long ago that an image was easier to manage than an argument. The Luna Choice had been his answer, a single broadcast event where the entire pack could watch one decision made in the open, and he believed, stop fighting each other over 100 private ones. Every candidate had been scored on paper long before she ever stepped into the light. Scent compatibility, noble bloodline, public approval, charity image, camera presence, alliance value. Poll numbers rendered down to clean percentages on a producer's tablet. Rowan knew the process was not sacred. He told himself it was necessary anyway. A Luna chosen in public can calm a pack faster than a war. From behind the curtain, long before she ever collapsed on that floor, Aria had watched him rehearse that same certainty in his posture and thought that a woman selected to soothe a crowd was not so different from a bandage wrapped tight over a wound already rotting underneath. Vivienne Cross had been built for that stage the way other wolves were built for war. She never spoke too quickly, never cried at an angle the cameras couldn't catch cleanly, never stood in bad light by accident. She knew which camera was live at any given second without glancing at it, knew how to look tenderly at the poor without ever touching them, knew exactly how to call Aria dear in a tone that made the words sound like a closed door. In front of Rowan, she was warmth itself. Backstage, where no primary camera reached, she let something colder show. A Luna is not chosen because she hurts, she told Aria once, adjusting a bracelet without looking at her. She is chosen because no one can see where she hurts. There was a night, though, in a dressing room lit only by a mirror bulb, when Vivienne let something slip that was not calculation at all. You think being unseen is cruelty, she said quietly, watching her own reflection instead of Aria. I was watched until nothing private survived, and they called that love. For a moment, something almost human moved behind her perfect face, a girl who had never once been allowed to be ordinary, who had learned that being seen constantly was the only kind of safety her family had ever offered her. She did not soften after that moment. If anything, she straightened as if the confession embarrassed her, and Aria understood then that Vivienne had not simply survived the machine that made her. She had decided to become its favorite instrument instead, and to make sure no one, especially not an invisible waitress with something private still left inside her, escaped the same fate. What neither Aria nor the watching pack knew yet was the true shape of Vivienne's ambition. Under an old and rarely invoked law called the Emergency Luna Compact, if an alpha died within minutes of publicly naming his Luna, the chosen woman gained temporary authority over the pack bond for 72 hours. Vivienne and Julian Sable had spent months preparing to use that window, to blame the assassination on rogue districts, to push through a purity security law granting Julian's media division policing power, to cast Vivienne as a grieving Luna, too composed and too beloved to question, and to close the door on reform for a generation. "A Luna is not a woman," Vivienne told Julian once, rehearsing it like a line. "A Luna is the face a frightened pack can obey," and in a colder moment meant only for herself, she added the truth beneath it. "Love is unstable, Aria. Image survives the body." Back on the live stage, chaos had already broken every careful frame Julian had built. Aria lay on the floor behind the glass wall, the mark burning against her ribs, unable to draw a full breath as the pain of a death that had not yet happened moved through her exactly as her mother had once described it. Borrowed suffering with no permission asked. Rowan left the ring on the stage floor and crossed toward the wall without a word to the host, without a glance at Vivienne's outstretched hand trying to catch his sleeve. Security closed around Aria fast, and Dax Rourke, closest to the breach, moved on instinct to treat her as a threat rather than a victim, hand already at his belt. Vivienne recovered her composure just in time to speak into the nearest live microphone, suggesting, gently, sorrowfully, that the Waitress might be a rogue operative using a manufactured curse to sabotage the selection. Rowan knelt beside Aria anyway. "What did you do?" he asked, his voice low enough that only she could hear it. She managed the words through the pain clawing up her spine. "I did not make the mark. Someone made your death." He ordered her taken to the secure medical wing instead of holding, overruling the murmurs already rising among his own security detail. Julian scrambled to scrub the footage from the official broadcast feed, but the clip was already loose on every pack network, already spreading faster than any single director could contain, already carrying its own headline before morning. "Cursed Waitress bears Alpha King's death mark." In the medical wing, stripped of cameras and audience, Aria explained what she was as plainly as she could manage, her voice thin from exertion. She told Rowan the curse did not name a killer outright, only revealed the shape and direction of a death meant for someone bound to her by a true living connection, drawn out onto her own body before it could happen. Dax stood near the door, arms crossed, unconvinced, and Rowan himself did not fully believe her. Not yet, though he could not explain away the wound bleeding through her uniform either. "The mark on her chest," she said, pointed to a silver bullet, fired from somewhere near the camera left side of the stage, timed close to a public vow. When the footage replayed on a nearby screen, the mark flared hotter the instant. It reached the frame of Rowan lifting the ring, a fresh line of pain cutting across her chest, as if the wound were being drawn again from the start. It was not simply his death the mark was tracking. It was the exact moment he chose a Luna. If he died in the seconds after naming Vivienne, the pack bond would fall directly into the hands of the emergency Luna compact, and whoever controlled that 72-hour window would control everything that followed. "Your death is not the end of their plan," Aria told him. "It is the opening scene." Determined to find the weapon before the show could be forced back into motion, Aria moved through the backstage corridors toward the security staging area where confiscated props and scanned equipment were kept. The mark burned harder the moment Dax stepped into the same hallway, close enough to the weapon case that her skin screamed a warning she had no time to question. She remembered, in that instant, not evidence, but her mother's hands trembling every time a noble guard came too close, remembered 13 years old and believing pain would bring help instead of suspicion. She told Rowan that Dax felt like the danger. Rowan, trusting her curse over the loyalty of a man who had guarded him for years, ordered Dax detained. The security line thinned exactly where it should not have, the lighting platform above the stage left uncovered while Dax's post sat empty and disputed. In that gap, the real threat moved. A light rig above the stage sparked and dropped, destroying the one backup camera positioned to catch the wings from an angle Julian did not control. And in the confusion, June Harlow was thrown against a support beam hard enough to break through skin and bone alike. The true assassin slipped away through the service tunnel Aria herself had once used to disappear from cameras, gone before anyone thought to look there at all. Dax was released within the hour, his innocence plain in the footage that remained, but the damage to the room and to him was not so easily repaired. "And you decided my loyalty was less real than your fear," he told her, not shouting, which somehow made it worse. June, pale and bandaged, added her own accusation from the medical bed beside Aria's. "You saw pain and called it truth." Aria had no argument to offer either of them. The curse had given her a warning. It had not given her proof, and she had let fear fill the gap where evidence should have stood, at the cost of a man's honor and a woman's blood. Alone afterward, Rowan reviewed the operational structure of his own program for the first time as if seeing it clearly. Every candidate's position on stage had been fixed to the inch for the cameras, security routes bent around lighting rigs rather than around actual danger. Emergency exits sat disguised behind decorative set pieces. Staff corridors did not appear on any official safety map at all. Service workers had no direct line to raise an alarm if something went wrong around them. The broadcast delay, and every second of it, belonged entirely to Julian. Even the ring in his own hand had been cleared by sponsors before it was ever cleared by him. He asked how many staff had been backstage that night. No one on his team could give him an exact number. His show knew which woman the pack wanted to see beside him. It did not know which woman had fallen bleeding behind the stage to keep him alive. For years, Rowan had called that organization. Now he understood what it had organized out of sight. The women who served, bled, cleaned, carried, and disappeared before the cameras found them. The show had budgeted for Vivienne's flowers, her lighting, the exact angle of her ring close up. It had not budgeted for the girl bleeding in the hallway because her mother's debt had brought her there in the first place. A woman chosen to calm a crowd is not a Luna, Aria told him quietly, and this time he did not defend the stage that had almost gotten her, or June, or Dax killed. Vivienne struck back through the only weapon she had ever fully mastered. She appeared before an emergency broadcast, with tears arranged perfectly along her cheekbones, offering forgiveness to Aria as a confused, cursed servant while warning the pack that if the Waitress were instead a rogue weapon, they needed protection immediately. Julian released a quietly edited clip, suggesting Aria had cut herself to fake the mark for attention, and within hours the pack's feeds filled with hashtags calling her a hoax and calling for the perfect Luna to be protected at any cost. When June, still recovering, tried to preserve the unedited footage, Julian found her anyway, his voice flat and untroubled by what he was admitting. "Truth is just footage without distribution," he told her, almost kindly. "The camera does not reveal the story," he added. "It decides which story survives." Vivienne pushed the council toward a curse liability act that would allow cursed workers to be detained the moment their abilities disrupted public order, framing it, sweetly, as protection rather than punishment. "Fear does not need proof when a pack is watching its alpha bleed," she said, and enough frightened wolves nodded along that the measure nearly passed by morning. Aria wanted to run, certain her mother's story was repeating itself exactly, a cursed woman consumed by powerful people who had never once asked if the pain was hers to give. Instead, June pressed a half-burned memory card into her hand before Aria could disappear into the tunnels she knew so well, and the mark under Aria's collar throbbed once, hard, as if it recognized the truth sitting inside that small piece of plastic before she did. The surviving footage showed Julian adjusting the broadcast delay by exactly 8 seconds, moments before the death mark had ever appeared on the main feed. It was not enough to convict anyone. It was enough to begin building something stronger than a single accusation. Working through what remained of the night, Aria, Rowan, Dax, June, and a young production assistant named Theo laid every fragment side by side. Dax had not forgiven her yet, but he stayed anyway. Because Rowan was still a hunted man whether or not Aria had misjudged him earlier. Together they assembled 4 pieces of a single design. The silver ring in Rowan's hand carried a faint trace of poison beneath its polish. The spotlight-positioned camera left concealed a miniature firing mechanism built directly into its housing. The broadcast delay would let the entire pack watch Rowan choose Vivienne seconds before they learned he had died doing it, and a legal packet already prepared in Vivienne's possession detailed exactly how she intended to invoke the emergency Luna compact the instant his death was confirmed. Aria realized the bullet had never been the true weapon at all. It was only the visible half of it. The real target was the pack bond itself, waiting to be hijacked the moment grief made the whole kingdom too afraid to ask questions. They were not trying to kill an alpha, she said. They were trying to film the birth of a lie. After the failure with Dax, Aria refused to carry the truth alone again. She built what she began calling the death path chain, a structure where every fragment of evidence belonged to a living witness, rather than to her body alone. She kept the physical mark. June kept the raw footage. Dax kept the security logs. Theo kept the staff corridor maps no official document had ever recorded. Rowan kept the legal packet detailing the compact. An older councilwoman named Aria Moss, once a firm supporter of Vivienne's stability, kept a certified copy of the emergency Luna compact once she understood exactly how it had been meant to be used. A sound engineer, quietly disgusted by what he'd been asked to adjust, kept the audio delay record. A death mark carried by one cursed woman could be dismissed as hysteria. A death mark carried by witnesses became a warning no camera could edit away. Aria had spent her whole life trying to disappear so the curse could never be used the way it had used her mother. Now, for the first time, she let it become something else entirely, not a secret to hide, but a truth other people were willing to stand beside. Vivienne, through Ilara's careful maneuvering, forced the broadcast back into motion within days, warning that canceling the selection outright would only confirm to the pack that its alpha had been manipulated by a cursed servant girl. Rowan agreed to return to the stage, but not to finish the choice everyone expected. The mark tightened the moment the decision was made, a slow warning pull beneath her ribs, as though it already knew the stage was calling the death path back towards its original hour. He intended to drag the assassination itself into the light, live, in front of every camera Julian could no longer fully control. Aria would stand at her old post among the staff rather than beside him, ready to trace the final death path the instant the mark reopened. Rowan wanted to keep her away from the stage entirely, to shield her from whatever came next. She refused him flatly. "Do not turn my pain into your secret shield," she told him. "That is what killed my mother." He understood finally, and did not order her anywhere. Instead, he asked her plainly, the way no noble house had ever bothered to ask her mother, "What do you choose?" "I choose to be witnessed," she answered. The broadcast lights rose again over a stage that looked, on the surface, exactly as it had before. Vivienne stood in her white gown once more, certain the script had simply resumed where it left off. Rowan walked out to meet her, the crowd's anticipation rising through the studio like a held note. Julian's hands moved over his console with practiced calm, cameras cutting exactly where he wanted them to. Aria stood at the edge of the wings, in the place a waitress was meant to be invisible, watching Vivienne lean toward Rowan and murmur just loud enough for the nearest microphone to catch. "Smile, Rowan. The pack is watching. Say it," Vivienne whispered next, still smiling for the lens. "If you die after, at least the pack will know who to obey." The mark on Aria's chest began to open again, and this time the pain did more than ache. It pulled her heartbeat out of rhythm with her own body, dragging it toward whatever moment was coming. She did not accuse anyone yet. She turned instead to the chain of witnesses gathered quietly at the edge of the stage. June switched the backup screen to raw, unedited footage in full view of the live audience. Dax raised the security logs. Theo unfolded the staff corridor map no official document had ever shown. Alara held up her certified copy of the Emergency Luna Compact. The sound engineer let the delay recording play through the studio speakers for everyone to hear. Rowan held the ring but did not put it on. The mark on Aria's chest flared white-hot. The instant Vivienne stepped closer to him, and in that same breath Aria understood the last piece of the design. The weapon was not a gun hidden somewhere in the crowd. It was built directly into the broadcast lens itself, a micro-silver round set to fire. The moment Rowan spoke 5 specific words, "I choose Vivienne Cross," Aria's voice tore through the studio before he could finish the sentence. The first truth reached the crowd. Julian lunged for the control board next, trying to cut the feed one last time. June had already routed the raw signal to every public screen in the building. The second truth reached the screens. "The camera does not reveal the story," Julian said again, louder now, almost desperate. "It decides which story survives." Vivienne's composure finally broke in front of the very lens that had built her. The third truth reached Vivienne's own face. "A Luna is not a woman," she said, her voice rising past its careful training. "A Luna is the face a frightened pack can obey." Aria stepped forward into the light she had spent her whole life avoiding, her hand pressed against the mark still burning beneath her uniform. "Then you never wanted to be his Luna," she said. "You wanted to be the mask they buried him under." Julian's hand slammed down on the trigger control before anyone could stop him. Aria did not throw herself in front of anything. She gave orders instead, each one short, each one clear. The fourth truth moved faster than fear. "Rowan, drop the ring. Dax, break the glass lens. Theo, cut the light grid. June, keep the feed live. Alara, hold the packet up to the camera." Rowan let the ring fall from his hand exactly as she said it. Dax crossed the stage in 3 strides and shattered the housing of the camera-left spotlight with the butt of his sidearm. The shot fired wide, missing Rowan by a margin no one in that room would ever forget. Vivienne staggered back as the sealed legal packet slipped from beneath her arm and hit the stage floor in full view of every watching camera. The mark did not close when Rowan survived. It tore wider first, punishing her body for changing a death that had already chosen its path. The wound split from her chest up toward her throat, a crack of silver and red spreading across her skin, and for several seconds she could not draw breath at all, could only stand there while Dax caught her before her knees gave out entirely. She did not die, but the scar that remained afterward, shaped like a bullet broken mid-flight, would never fully fade, a permanent record of the death she had rerouted rather than escaped. The victory belonged to the chain she had built, and the people who had chosen to stand inside it with her, not to any single roar of alpha authority. Vivienne and Julian were taken into custody before the broadcast ever fully cut to black. Rowan did not step forward afterward to claim the role of victim alone. He stood before the cameras with no ring in his hand, no perfect Luna beside him, no script waiting on a teleprompter. "I did not aim the bullet," he told the pack, "but I built the stage where a woman could be chosen before she was heard." He admitted, plainly, that the Luna choice had turned consent into content, turned candidates into products ranked by percentages, and turned every worker behind the curtain into someone the cameras were never meant to notice. He canceled the program on the same broadcast that had almost ended his life. Vivienne, still under guard, shouted that the pack would panic without an answer to give them. "Then they will hear the truth without music behind it," Rowan answered, and did not raise his voice to say it. In the weeks that followed, Rowan signed what became known across the pack as the Bond Consent Act, dismantling the very machine that had nearly killed him and had already, quietly, killed people like Aria's mother long before the cameras ever turned toward her. No Luna selection could be broadcast as entertainment again. No mate bond could be announced publicly without full consent from both wolves involved. Public polls could no longer determine whether a Luna's claim was legitimate. Candidates gained the explicit right to withdraw without penalty from their pack or family. Cursed workers could not be detained simply because their abilities disrupted a public event. Every pack gathering required an independent panic channel for staff, separate from any official security chain. Political alliances could no longer be forced into mate contracts under any circumstance. Broadcast footage could not be edited to implicate cursed wolves without a verified, unedited original on record. The emergency Luna compact could never again be triggered by a death confirmed to have occurred during a manipulated broadcast. Every Bond ceremony now required a private consent hearing before any public recognition could follow. Camera crews were required to obtain explicit consent before filming any such hearing, and every cursed witness gained the right to demand a full witness chain before their gift could be used as proof of anything at all. The clause Rowan insisted be read aloud at the signing stood above all the rest. No bond shall be made lawful by cameras before it is made willing by the wolves who carry it. Aria was offered a new role in the reformed system, not because Rowan claimed her as his own, but because the pack needed someone whose entire purpose was making sure no one else became an image, a shield, or public property against their will. She accepted the title of Keeper of Living Consent, and did not once, in accepting it, agree to become anyone's Luna. Some time later, Rowan found her in the same studio, empty now of audience, of lights, of the host's practiced voice, of Vivienne's white stage. Only empty chairs remained, and coiled cable across the floor like something finally allowed to rest. The mate bond between them was still there, warm, undeniable, and quietly frightening in the way true things often are. Aria thought of her mother, of the mark, of every camera that had ever turned her pain into someone else's headline. Rowan kept a careful distance, close enough to be heard, far enough not to press. He did not reach for her. He did not call her Luna. He did not tell her she was his. "If the bond is real," he asked instead, "where do I begin?" She looked past him at the one remaining camera in the room, its small red light still glowing faithfully in the dark. "Turn it off," she said. He crossed the room and did it himself, not asking a technician to do it for him, not turning the gesture into something meant to be watched later. He simply turned it off. "Now ask again," she said. He faced her fully this time. "Where do I begin?" "By asking what parts of me are not yours to save," she answered. It was not a yes. It was not a no. It was the first honest question either of them had ever been allowed to ask without an audience deciding the answer for them. A month after the broadcast that nearly killed him, the old Luna Choice studio had been converted into something the pack now called the Consent Hall. The voting screens were gone. The beauty rankings were gone. The sponsor banners had been taken down and never replaced. Couples came there now, chosen mates, rejected mates, cursed wolves carrying gifts no one had ever bothered to explain properly, all seeking a private hearing before anything about their bond became public at all. Vivienne and Julian stood trial before the full pack council, their fates no longer decided by ratings or polls. Dax returned to his post at Rowan's side, his honor restored in full record if not yet entirely in his own heart. June came back to work as a camera operator, though now she waited for a single nod before ever lifting the lens toward anyone's private moment. This time, June said, lifting the camera only after Aria nodded, "The lens waits." Theo became the hall's witness coordinator, keeping track of every corridor, every exit, every worker who might otherwise have gone unnoticed the way Aria once had. Councilwoman Elara oversaw the full reform of the Emergency Luna Compact, ensuring no grieving Luna could ever again inherit a kingdom built on a broadcast lie. Aria did not wear a gown to the hall. She wore no crown, and she did not stand beside Rowan like something won on a game show stage. She stood near the entrance instead, checking, quietly, whether everyone inside still had a door they were free to walk through. Rowan found her there one afternoon, his voice low enough to belong only to the two of them. "First case?" he asked. Aria looked down at the list in her hand. A young Omega girl wanted to refuse a public mate announcement, even though the mate chosen for her was a noble heir the whole pack expected her to be grateful for. Once, a camera would have swallowed a girl like that whole before she ever understood she had a choice at all. Today, Aria opened the back door for her instead and let her leave before anyone outside the hall learned her name. Rowan did not ask why. He did not stand in the way. He simply positioned himself in the hallway, blocking the nearest camera's view until the girl was safely gone. Aria felt the old mark on her chest, still there, never fully erased, a silver and red reminder of everything it had cost to reach this quiet room. It did not ache the way it once had. The pack had once watched women become Lunas beneath studio lights. Now, behind closed doors, Aria made sure they could say no before anyone taught them how to smile. Rowan did not choose her on live TV. He learned, slowly, to choose the silence where her answer could be her own.